Welcome to Sumaya Unveiled. Today we have a special guest, Richard Villasana. Richard is the founder of Forever Homes for Foster Kids. It's a nonprofit agency that seeks to reunite foster and displaced immigrant children with their families. Last year, I had the privilege of interviewing Richard on my father, Les Brown's YouTube channel, and I'll be sure to place the link in the description box so that you can check it out at a later time. On this episode of Sumaya Unveiled, we're going to dig deeper into the mission and vision that drives Richard to do the incredible work that he is doing. So thank you for joining me as we welcome Richard Villasana. I'd like to welcome you to Sumaya Unveiled. We have a special guest, Richard Villasana, who will be joining us today. But before he does, I just want to share a brief motivational word. As we decide that we are going to live out our dreams and pursue our goals and walk in purpose, we can run up against so much opposition that we can literally talk ourselves out of our destinies. But what would happen if we would simply take a step back to stop, reflect, and think? Think about why we want to do what we are doing. Think about who we are going to impact if we move forward. Think about who would not be impacted if we decided to throw in the towel and quit. My father, Les Brown, has a message entitled, "It's Possible." And sometimes you have to look at what seems impossible in your life and look at the possibilities. Is it possible that if you work hard and you put in the effort, you can achieve that goal? Is it possible that your life can be different than it is right now? Sometimes life will make you feel like the wind is literally knocked out of you. It's hard to focus. It's hard to know if your mind will ever be wired the way it was before that tragedy hit or before depression hit. Sometimes it's hard. You will have days where you are fired up and ready to go. And then you will have those other days where you feel like, oh my gosh, I felt like I took 12 steps backwards. Just remember, you will get there. You just have to keep moving. Richard, you are a hero in human form, and I remember interviewing you on my father's YouTube channel, Les Brown. You talk about your work at Forever Home for Foster Kids and your book, Do No Harm. And I just want to recap. Our identities don't lie in what we do, but they do kind of inform what we do and how we navigate in the earth. So, my first question to you is, who is Richard Villasana, and what is the great work that you are doing currently?
Well, I would say I'm the founder of an international nonprofit, Forever Homes for Foster Kids. I'm the person who is the driving force behind this work to reunite immigrant children who are in the federal system here in the United States and children who are in the foster care system to get them out of those systems and back with their families. I'm all about family, and that's reflected in the work that I do. If I can, I'll share a quick story to illustrate what I do. We had a case recently that was brought to us by a foster care agency. There was a teenage girl, and she had been in foster care for several months. Even though she was born in the US, the only relatives that she had any information about were two uncles and two aunts who were living in the Dominican Republic. She could only give us their names, kind of an idea of their age, and that they lived in this country. And that was it, which is not a lot of information. We were able to take this case on, and in this particular instance, we closed that case in less than 48 hours by finding her favorite uncle. They're in the Dominican Republic with that little piece of information. She's now been connected to her uncle, and they shared with the caseworker another relative that's living in the US, and that's where she's going to go stay. That's what we do. We find relatives that no one else can find, and we specialize in doing this in Latin America. And these relatives will often know of a relative in the United States who will gladly take the child in, get them out of foster care, give them a loving, caring, forever family, and get them back with their own family.
Richard, after you reunite these families, on your end, the case is closed. Have you ever had a family member come back and give you an update on what happened after you brought them together? Do you have any compelling stories that you could share with us about families that you've reunited?
Oh, we have had so many stories. One in particular is that we had worked a case for a teenager. We had found his relatives in Mexico, and those relatives were able to give the caseworker information about a godmother who was living in same state, California. And the godmother said, absolutely. So she took in the foster child, and not only did she take him in, but she adopted him.
Wow, that is incredible. It's incredible and it speaks to the purpose of your work. That clearly it's not just a job for you, but it's deeper than a job. It's a purposeful, meaningful work. And I believe personally that whether someone is an entrepreneur, a plumber, a singer, a doctor, whatever they are, as long as they are operating in their purpose to encourage others and exemplify who they need to be in serving others, that's a beautiful thing. And it speaks to purpose. And so now I just want to dig a little bit deeper into Richard, the human being. So we want to do a little bit of an unveiling. And we want to get beneath the surface of what you do to find out what drives you. I find that most of us operate in our purpose and destiny and are often hindered because we have labels that are placed on us or labels that we place on ourselves, almost like veils. Veils that keep us from operating in our destiny and in our purpose. Have you ever had anything in your life that stood in the way of you seeing yourself in the light of what you do right now? Have you ever had a time in your life where maybe you weren't operating at this level, where you were considered a different Richard, whether you viewed yourself differently or whether others viewed you differently? Have you ever had stigmas or labels or ideologies placed on you? And how did you get beyond that to become the person that you are today?
That's a great question. And I would say definitely how I was viewed is something that I had to work with. And what I'm talking about is when I first started working with foster children, I would just do the cases. And I don't mean that to sound cavalier, but we would get the cases in, we would do the cases, we would return the information to the caseworkers. There was a point when I was doing that where I got a phone call, and a gentleman said, look, I do what you do, but I do it in the United States. I find relatives here, and I teach people how to do this here in the United States. We have 90,000 Latino children every year coming into foster care, and we don't have people who read and understand Spanish. So these kids are left often. No one's looking for their relatives. They don't get out of foster care until they age out, and then their options are 4 out of 5 being homeless, trafficking victim, ending up in prison. And he said, we need someone like you to step up and to advocate and to help these children. I said, okay. I really buckled down at that point. I closed everything I was doing. And I said, okay, we're closing all that. 24 hours later, had my website, put it up. Everything was shifted to just helping foster kids. I now started to reach out to former foster children social media groups. That didn't get the kind of warm, fuzzy reception I was expecting. I got a lot of pushback on that. They were like, you're not a foster kid. You don't know what's going on. But I still got lots of pushback. So one of my thoughts has been seeing myself as an outsider. And that's something I've worked with. For me, the mission overrode everything. The mission and what I wanted to accomplish for each child, every case to get them back to their relatives, superseded any kind of hesitation or concern about, well, do I really know what's going on with these kids? Am I able to relate? Maybe not. Maybe not at all. But I was succeeding at what I wanted to do, which was to find the relatives for a child so they could get out of foster care. Very successful at doing that. So the mission has overridden any kind of concern I had. And I think everyone runs into that as we're doing it. We're not thinking like, I've arrived. Oh, we don't feel like we've arrived, but we keep doing and we keep succeeding. And then there is going to be a time where we say, I have arrived. There's someone who's in the foster care community, wonderful woman, Kathy Jones, and she is former foster child, has written about it. She sits on the board. She works with lots of organizations to come up with legislation that will help foster children. And I wrote her and I said, thank you so much for being my friend, being my colleague, supporting me. I said, because I feel like an outsider. She said, you're not an outsider. Back when you first started, you were getting attacked from people and I was supporting you. Many of those people who are advocating for foster kids, they've stopped. And the ones who are left, most of them have come over to our way of thinking. And she said, you're really one of the only people still out there advocating. After all these years, you have been consistent with your advocacy of supporting foster kids. I think we sometimes get those moments in our life where we get that validation. We're like, okay, I'm not an outsider, or I am successful, or I'm really good at what I'm doing. And it's not because of who I know or who got me in the door. I did the work. I did what was necessary to be successful, and this is who I am. From that standpoint, that's part of my veil being removed and seeing myself for the person I am in that particular aspect.
Richard, that was so insightful. And I want to thank you for sharing that. And what I heard that really stood out is that you had a mission and you were mission minded. And the moment that you had a mission, everything else faded into the background. And it wasn't really about anything that anyone said or even about you, but the way that you approached your work changed when you were focused on the mission. It made all the difference in the world. You got into a routine and things began to pick up, and you stepped into your destiny and into your identity of being who you are and what you do in terms of the mindset. How important is it for someone who may be wrestling with their mission or understanding who they are to recognize the why behind what they do? And what would you say to someone who's struggling right now, who's watching?
I would say if they're struggling with their why, they really need to take some time, disconnect, and think about it. And this sounds so simple and like, okay, yeah, he's just saying that, disconnect. But really, it's true. We don't engage a lot in self reflection and why we're doing what we're doing. It's so easy to flip on the TV or to hit the phone and start scrolling and or messaging people, but really to disconnect. And for me, I'm not talking about an hour or 2 hours. This might be a whole weekend. It might be a week. And again, I'm saying this in a way, yes, you have to go to work. Yes, you have to put food on the table, but there are ways to put this front and center of our thinking. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What do I really want? What if I didn't do what I'm doing? Would it be okay if I walked away from this? And the answer doesn't really matter because the answer might be, yeah, I really should be doing what I'm doing. My why's not strong enough. Something I thought of. I liked someone. That's why I got into this. Or someone told me I should do this. Or I was listening to my family. And we start to identify why we're really doing what we're doing. It might be, hey, I need to make some money because I owe bills and this is going to carry me over. But at least that's a reality that we see that this is what we're doing, but it's not really what we want to be doing. And then we can start looking at what do we really want to be doing? What is my why? And there are so many books out there. And I would definitely say whether you read it, you listen to it, get one of those books, focus in on it. What is the reason you're doing this? That's what gets you out of bed in the morning. That's what makes you say, I went to sleep at 5 a.m., but I've got a meeting at 9. I'll be there. That's what the power of that why. It is so important to have that. And that is my why, is knowing that if I don't do this, it's not like there's 50 other people standing behind me who can do it at my level. There just aren't. So it's easy for me to get out of bed because I know what my why is.
Wow, you said some powerful things that challenges us as the viewers, and I can clearly see what drives you and motivates you. It sounds like you were born to do this work. How is what you were doing reflective of who you are?
So thank you very much for asking. It is definitely was something that I was driven to do. In 2017, the U.S. government decided that they would initiate a policy where they would anyone who came to the U.S. border and came inside the U.S., whether they came through a port of entry or they came, across a river or a desert, when they asked for asylum, they would separate the children and the parents. Now, this had never been done before, but this was done as a policy. In 2018, the courts decided that this was a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Uh, we had laws that allowed people to do this, no matter how they got here. And so the government, there was an executive order put out to reunite these families. Now, that number has grown over the years. It started out as being 1,000, 1,500. Now it's grown to more than 5,000 families that were impacted. And they're coming from all kinds of countries in Central and South America and outside of Latin America. So there was this effort to put these families together. And the US government called in lots of nonprofits to look for people both in the US and outside the US. But the bottom line is they got stuck. There were some cases they just could not close. They could not find that relative. 2021, these organizations came to me and said, look, we need your help. And I got the worst cold cases. These are cases that had been worked on for years, no success. People said, we don't have enough information. We don't know where to look. And we started closing these cases. We have closed now over 100 of these worst cases, cold cases, on behalf of the federal government. We have found people knowing only their name and the country they lived in. That was it. Not even their age. And we were still able to find them. And we have done this all over Latin America. That is the work that we've been doing. And because of that, and because of how, in my estimation, how poorly this was done. Because when you have a rescue mission, you put everyone out there. You don't hold back. You get the dogs, you get the helicopter, you get everyone beating the ground and going into the forest. You're looking because if there's a child out there, you do not want to come back and say, well, we had 50 people to look, but we only sent 10 in. I've been sending in people to look in certain areas and I've been holding everyone else back instead of sending everybody. That's why after years that I get called in. And I saw that and said, you know what? I think the US public would like to know this. They would like to know that there was an executive order put out there and people did not act on this. They did not take this seriously. They did not jump on this. They did not go after and try to find these people with all their resources. They also didn't know about a lot of the suffering that happened to these people, that were happening to the children. There was a lot of misinformation. I said, I've got to write about this because I'm on the inside. I see the cases. I'm working them. I can tell people from personal experience what's going on. That was part of the book. And the other part of the book is about the foster care system because a lot of these immigrant children are being placed in foster care. As I said before, if they're Latino, nobody's looking. We don't have caseworkers who speak Spanish. This is a huge problem. And so no one's looking. No one's trying to find their mother, their father, their aunts and uncles. And so it's not one problem. It's kind of this blend of problems that comes from the federal side that ends up into our foster care system that impacts US born kids who aren't getting the proper attention because now we've got lots of these immigrant children who are in there and there's costs for that. And their families aren't being found. So they're staying in the system, costing thousands and thousands of dollars. And it gave me a way to highlight foster children. We really don't think a lot about foster children. But the day to day of children who are being abused or starved or who are aging out to become homeless, trafficking victims, or ending up in prison, we don't give a lot of thought to that. And I said, I could write about this and tie it to a big issue like immigration and get people to read about this. And they'll read about foster care and they'll read how we can fix it. They'll read success stories and they'll know that there are solutions. This is not a hopeless endeavor. Foster care is not a lost cause. Children need us, they need us to care. If I'm sounding very passionate about it, it's because I am, because these children need our help. They are innocents. That's why I wrote the book, to give people more than the personal story of someone, which is a wonderful thing. There are wonderful books by people who talk about their own personal journey, but this is about the mass journey of all these thousands and thousands of children who go into foster care, suffering they go through, the wonderful heroes, caseworkers, judges, foster parents, adoptive parents, nonprofits, people like me who are pushing and driving to have a better life for these kids, that there's light at the end of the tunnel. Together, we can make that difference.
Richard, thank you for joining us on Sumaya Unveiled and for sharing your mission and vision of how you bring these families together. And thank you for watching Sumaya Unveiled. If you'd like to learn more about Richard, there are links in the description box. You can see the interview that we did on Les Brown's channel. You can also see his book, Do No Harm, available on Amazon. Do No Harm, available on Amazon, as well as the link to his nonprofit, Forever Homes for Foster Kids. Thank you for watching Sumaya Unveiled. Remember, true identity is not an occupation. True identity is not a role. True identity is who you are. Thank you for watching.